Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Trump says the US is continuing to carry out large-scale combat operations in Iran. Meanwhile, Iran's security chief says it's prepared itself for a long war with the United States. US Secretary of War Pete Hegseth claims we didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we're finishing it. And global oil prices rise as Iran continues to launch strikes across the Middle East. Iran's security chief has said it's ready for a long war and as it targets energy sites across the Middle East. Meanwhile, the UN nuclear watchdog has said there's no indication Israeli and US attacks on Iran have hit any nuclear facilities. In the last hour, President Trump spoke for the first time since the strikes, telling reporters the US military operation will continue. Take a listen.
Today, the United States military continues to carry out large-scale combat operations in Iran to eliminate the grave threats posed to America by this terrible terrorist regime. Following our obliteration of Iran's nuclear program in Operation Midnight Hammer a short while ago, we warned Iran not to make any attempt to rebuild at a different location because they were unable to use the ones that we so powerfully blew up, but they ignored those warnings and refused to cease their pursuit of nuclear weapons. In addition, the regime's conventional ballistic missile program was growing rapidly and dramatically, and this posed a very clear, colossal threat to America and our forces stationed overseas. The regime already had missiles capable of hitting Europe and our bases, both local and overseas, and would soon have had missiles capable of reaching our beautiful America.
To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by broadcaster Jono and Arabiya English senior presenter Rawia Alami. Jono, so we just heard from President Donald Trump. He's obviously been speaking in the last hour or so since those strikes by the US and Israel hit Iran over the weekend. What did you make of what President Donald Trump had to say there? Because he actually had a lot to say.
He did, and I think what was different, we're used to hearing President Trump shooting from the hip, so to speak, when it comes to his speeches. This was very calculated. This had a lot of clarity in there. There was confidence in his tone as well, and he framed it, and rightly so, as a war of necessity. It wasn't choice. We heard him mention there that Iran had ignored the warnings and continued to pursue that nuclear program that they had warned them so very much so not to pursue, and expanded the missile program as well. The clear objectives that he set: destroy missile capabilities for Iran, dismantle its navy, prevent it from ever obtaining a nuclear weapon. He was very clear, very methodical. This was a rehearsed, if not definitely very well scripted statement is what he made. He said it's not about boots on the ground. And although I think you've informed me that he has mentioned to a news outlet that he is considering it as an option.
Yes, he did say, Trump says he won't rule out boots on the ground in Iran, and that was according to the New York Post. But we have had conflicting reports when it comes to that exact statement.
But what he has said is it's not going to be an endless war. He's clearly aiming here to reassure the domestic audience and to the greater GCC region as well, which is feeling the effects of this right now, to make sure that they're aware that there is a plan in place. Militarily, he's saying there's momentum there as well. The US is ahead of that initial 4 to 5 week program that he said. It can go on longer, of course, if needed. But strategically, even without ground troops and no mention of them just yet, this is a widening regional conflict. So the key question now, I guess, is more about whether Iran can absorb that pressure, or is this going to escalate even further? And I think that's the next thing that we now need to look at.
And we did see that widen with Israel and Lebanon. We've seen them trading fire, of course, Hezbollah within Lebanon. So that conflict has widened out of Iran at the moment when we do look at things. But I just find it absolutely fascinating that 48 hours since the beginning of this war, Iran seems to have changed the rules of engagement in many respects, Rawia, because we've seen them initially say we're going to attack US military bases if we are attacked, and now it's moved on to energy facilities. And I think this has become a lot of the chat today. What's happening?
True, not just energy facilities. We have airports like that have been hit here in Dubai, in Kuwait, in other also areas in the Gulf region. So definitely it seems that the escalation is actually happening. Things seem to be widening, the conflict seems to be widening, definitely compared to the weekend. Now, over the past 24 to 48 hours, as you've mentioned, Iran has broadened its response far beyond just the initial retaliatory strikes. They have moved from missiles and drones that target military bases, U.S. military assets in the region, to actually targeting energy infrastructure all across the Gulf. Of course, these facilities are central to global energy supplies, and therefore it has triggered a ripple effect and has caused also, we're going to talk about this, the oil prices to surge. But it is significant because for most of the conflict, strategic oil and gas infrastructure was mostly spared, but now we're seeing a different pattern happening. It's hard to say whether this is part of the initial plan that Iran had. It does seem that they've had a plan in place because obviously President Trump has been threatening to strike Iran for a while now. And it seems that they did have a plan in place, just looking at their retaliatory response that came so quickly after the initial Israeli and American strikes. Whether this broadening and the sort of gradual escalation of targets and of the conflict itself by Iran, whether it's part of that plan, or is it a reflection of despair, maybe, of they're using everything that they have at this stage because of the damage they've sustained due to the strikes so far? I think we're yet to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And today, Jono, just for example, further blasts heard in Qatar, UAE, Kuwait. We've seen the extent of it, haven't we, throughout the last few days. We're in Dubai. Everyone has felt the effects in the Arab countries. And it's quite interesting because in a CNN interview, President Donald Trump said biggest surprise has been Iranian attacks against Arab countries.
Yeah.
And this is definitely the widening that we've seen.
Widening is an understatement of the century for this. When you look at and I'm not going to refer to them as allies, but I'm certainly going to say that Oman would be someplace that has been seen as the where we will go to negotiate. That is the one option, the mediator in this situation. And you look at Dubai, which has been a stalwart, certainly from the import-export game. There is not an AC unit or a dishwasher that exists in Iran that has not been shipped through Dubai.
And I also think we buy so much Iranian produce in the shops here in
Absolutely.
Dubai. In the
so it seemed like it was shooting yourself in the foot. And yes, we can see, and as Rawia said, that escalation towards energy targets. I mean, I'm thankful that the defence operations system that's in place here is so wonderful and so robust that it has taken out hundreds of these missiles which have made their way and intercepted them before they even made landfall. But I just think right now what Iran is doing is more of a knee-jerk reaction. We'll throw the short-range missiles, which we know they have, probably a couple of thousand of those at their dispersal, to be able to get them into somewhere to try and cause some damage where possible. This is no longer a calculated mission whereby we're aiming for something specifically. This is a, let's put it into your airspace and see if we can manage to hit something, which, and I'm, again, so thankful that that has not been the case so far. It's been very unsuccessful. 98% of the missiles which made their way into UAE airspace were downed, were intercepted and taken down. That is a phenomenal interception rate by any accounts. Yeah. Worldwide, that is phenomenal. But to see that and to know that I think Iran might be kind of in the dark with regards to this and are not entirely sure what they're doing, because nobody would go into a country whereby they have said, and again, not allies, but they've been somewhat connected so closely to them, and shoot themselves in the foot. It seems crazy.
We have to remember that they've sustained some real hard damage. I mean, they got a knockout with basically targeting the supreme leader and actually taking him out, with so many other commanders as well. I'm not sure that the Iranians were expecting that to happen so quickly, and I think, yes, maybe they are in a state of despair and they're just shooting.
And they're without leadership, because right now there is no leadership, and you wonder who's steering the ship when it comes to that. And I know a few names have been touted around, but we don't know what's going to happen next. And what's more terrifying is that Iran doesn't seem to know what's going to happen next and who's going to take it. And when we've heard echoes of Hassan Khamenei, who's the grandson of the Islamic Republic founder, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, which we've heard of his name being shot around. Mujtaba, who is the son of the late supreme leader, his name has been put in there as well. But it really depends on what happens next in terms of that leadership, because we're not going to see that instant retaliation from the public and a change in the system that's currently in place and the governance that's there. So they will still appoint somebody, but right now they seem to be completely lost as regards to what's next.
And it's interesting because the US says it's taken out between 48 and 49 Iranian commanders, which is a huge number. As we know, the supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei, too, he was also killed in these precision strikes, and intel from America. And I think it's also important to say, Trump said, we don't know what succession plan is in Iran, who the new leader will be. And he said that in his CNN interview. So like Jono just said, it's a reflection that there is a power vacuum right now.
True.
Dangerous place.
Well, the country is walking this tightrope.
I think, President Trump said that he has many options. He actually named, or he talked about 3 different options for leadership in Iran. But it seems to me that the Americans they like the scenario that happened in Venezuela, where even though there was an opposition leader that was groomed to replace Maduro, and she was also,
Nobel Peace Prize winner.
Nobel Peace Prize winner. She was backed by President Trump. Yet when it came to the new leadership for Venezuela, the scenario was completely different. And he chose to keep key figures from the old regime, but with new policies, with new alliances with the United States.
And I guess a lot of the reason for keeping Delcy Rodriguez in Venezuela is because she had the support of the military.
Exactly.
And that's absolutely
and we could have a similar
in places like Iran and in Venezuela.
So we could have a similar situation. Don't forget that the Americans have been talking to Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister. We don't know what really went behind the scenes in the last few negotiating sessions. Maybe there was an arrangement, or God knows. We're going to see what's going to happen. But maybe these figures that have been so well associated with the old regime will come out with a new one.
You would hope so. And you hope there's a plan in place. And I think that's it. Backed and supported by the United States. That mutual support will need to happen. And again, you need to say that needs to be there. But with this regional escalation that we're seeing right now, again, we're talking about Beirut, which has seen that significant escalation today. 31 people have been killed, according to the Lebanese ministry. And that is a direct attack on Hezbollah. So we've now seen it spread to there. The UK, 2 drones intercepted in Cyprus as well. So the UK is now treating that as a direct security threat to its sovereignty and its military practices as well. So you have to look at how big this is getting and how quickly it's moving. You would hope, like Rawia said, that there has to be a plan in place from the US's point of view of what is for the day after, what is for when this is done, 4 or 5 weeks, hopefully down the line. When this is done, what is the then plan?
And we're going to discuss this in our next segment, because we're going to come on to Pete Hegseth. So stay right there and we'll get into the off-ramp, because I thought what he had to say was really interesting. US Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has also given his first remarks since the US-Israeli military strikes on Iran at the weekend. Hegseth discussed the joint operation, code-named Operation Roaring Lion by Israel and Epic Fury by the US. He claimed, we didn't start this war, but under President Donald Trump, we're going to finish it. Take a listen.
This is not a so-called regime change war, but the regime sure did change, and the world is better off for it. We didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it. Their war on Americans has become our retribution against their Ayatollah and his death cult. It took the 47th president, a fighter who always puts America first, to finally draw the line after 47 years of Iranian belligerence. He reminded the world, as he has time and time again, being an American means something unbreakable. If you kill Americans, if you threaten Americans anywhere on earth, we will hunt you down without apology and without hesitation, and we will kill you.
So, Rawia, we heard there from Pete Hegseth, and I found his speech actually quite fascinating because it was all about how they carried out and why they came to this decision to attack Iran. But once again, there was no off-ramp given by Pete Hegseth what the next steps are after it happens. It's kind of like, oh, it might last this long, but there's an infinite time. Look, I get what he was trying to say, but then once again, no one got these answers of the next steps.
It is the most difficult question. I mean, we've seen it in Gaza, you know, during the Gaza war and after. That was a question that I think until now it's not properly answered. The next day, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And I don't think the Americans, whether you know, Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, or even the president, have an idea as to, you know, a solid idea as to what is next. But what I find really interesting is the discrepancies in the different speeches and the different statements that we're getting. Pete Hegseth, we just heard him saying this is not a regime change war, but the regime has surely changed, okay? If you remember...
It's supreme leader.
Yeah, but definitely. It is a changed regime, but not necessarily a changed regime war. But if you remember, when President Trump came out announcing the beginning of these strikes, he talked about regime change. Yeah. And I think this is what the Americans and the Israelis are hoping for, that, you know, once the Ayatollah is taken out, the major leaders of this regime is taken out, then the people are going to flood the streets and they're going to take over, and, you know, and that's how it's going to happen. But we have not seen this going on since the strikes began. Pete Hegseth, I felt that you know, his message was clear. There was a projection of utter confidence in the military capability of, obviously, of the United States. His message was essentially the US is in control, the operation is limited, and the escalation is not the goal. He says that we didn't start the war because he's referring to, you know, the Iranian attacks on American interests for over 40 years. He's talking about, or more than that, since 1979, since you know, the birth of this Ayatollah regime. But he says that the United States is going to finish it. Will that be possible? I think it depends on the definition of the word finish. Now, militarily, yes, they can cause major damage to the military capabilities of Iran. They can take out leaders. They can truly, you know, achieve some of the goals that they've set out in military terms. But then wars are not finished just by military. And then also bear in mind, we're talking about airstrikes and air power with no boots on the ground. Can that finish a war? Well, no, this is not how wars are finished. Definitely, the United States started the war. They can, you know, achieve military objectives, but then on a political level, not necessarily they'll be able to guarantee the duration of the mess and the chaos that's going to happen after.
And I think military experts have actually been reiterating that message, saying US and Israeli air power, you know, can definitely do damage, but with no armed forces on the ground, political change is very hard to implement, and that's something that a lot of people have been talking about. But, you know, Pete Hegseth, as we talked about, very, very robust in his speech, really, and talking to the American forces and saying, you know, be strong, this is our moment. But, you know, 4 US fatalities, military personnel lost their lives, and many more injured in Kuwait. And, you know, that is the reality of war right now. And that is what many people in the US are going to be thinking about at this time? Because when I think about it, military caskets being repatriated is a difficult image for people at home to swallow.
It absolutely is. And of course, there's the people in Iran. We don't know what fatalities are like on the ground there. We're seeing limited images of these horrifying strikes that have taken place there. So there is a death toll to be taken into account, aside from the school that we already know about, with 150.
555 so far, the Iranian Red Crescent is saying, but
again, there's
100,
probably
over 100 are little girls, basically.
Yes, which is tragic. Of course, that's tragic. But I guess the question is, how long can all of this continue for? How long can they fight this battle in the sky? The real toll that's been taken, and as we've heard as well from all these people who've passed away, and from even Donald Trump referencing that in his speech as well. I guess how long is a piece of string when it comes to this? It remains very much an air and missile conflict right now. It could continue for weeks. I mean, they've said 4 to 5 weeks, right? That's without boots on the ground. We're there. There's an indication that operation could go on longer, if necessary as well. But we have no input into what's happening on the ground in Iran. We have no idea if Tehran is still there at the moment, because we have no communication with anybody who's in there. So we're getting very, very limited information. And anything that we are getting out, it does look like it's a horrific state right now. However, it can't be overly horrific, because there are still missiles being intercepted across the airspace of the Gulf region. So it means they've still got that missile capability. And until the US takes that out entirely, there's still a threat. There's still a threat that everyone feels is pretty imminent. And that is a concern. You've got to look at because Iran have obviously famously been actively involved with Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and militias in Syria and in Iraq as well, and the Houthis, of course. So there is this regime change that we've heard so much about, of course, is on the cards. But now you're looking at, we don't know if people are on the streets, because there's a 40-day mourning period. For 7 days, everything is shut. Great way to keep people inside the house is to shut everything on the streets, isn't it? So we don't know if people are on the streets. We don't know if the people of Iran are taking this, what has been called the opportunity by Donald Trump, and seizing it to seize back power, or if they're just staying at home because nothing is open and outside is too dangerous.
And I also just think right now, as we're talking, I have seen that residents in Iran have jammed highways to try to flee the bombing. And about 90 million people live in Iran. It's vast. It's densely populated. Even though the US and Israel say they're carrying out strategic attacks, how can civilians not be caught up in something like that? And we talk about people not going into work because there's bombs happening. There's 40 days of mourning. But one of the reasons that those US anti-government protests started in January is because how difficult the economy is for people in Iran. Inflation is sky high. It's difficult to get food. It's difficult to pay their bills. And you just wonder what the wider ramifications they are facing right now.
Well, the thing is, I mean, don't forget that they're under attack. And I mean, even historically, when Iran was under attack, you're not going to see demonstrations coming out at this time, basically, against the regime. I don't know whether there's this code, even though we've seen videos of celebrations and, people screaming when they heard the news that the Khamenei was killed, in celebration. But they are still under attack. It's very difficult to expect people that are going to flood the streets and and take over the government or do anything at this stage while they're still under such vigorous attacks.
And as we've said before, Donald Trump wants that organic movement from the streets of Iran to change power in the country.
Well, he addressed them directly to the Iranian people, yes.
Yeah, but that was the question. He said, take this as the opportunity, get into the streets and take back your country. This was what he wanted them to do. And we don't know. And again, we don't know if it's happening. Yeah. I'm very skeptical. I very highly doubt that it is happening right now, given the situation, given how probably terrified everyone is on the ground. I think it's unlikely, but that was the opportunity, isn't it? If it's not going to be now, then when? Except we've seen there's people ready to take the place of the Ayatollah already. If that happens, we're back to
I think it's still early. It's still early. Depends what happens next. Depends basically once we start seeing the real sort of effect of the Israeli-American strikes, how much damage they have caused to the infrastructure, to the military infrastructure and capabilities of Iran. I think it's still early. Once we start seeing more days go on, I think, yes, we will see more.
And we'll
find out more.
We're still in that fog of war, the early stages.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Let's move on now to another story. And China says it will step up measures to protect its citizens in Iran as the situation evolves following US and Israel military strikes. Beijing has called for an immediate ceasefire and de-escalation, urging all sides to return to diplomatic talks to prevent a wider regional conflict. Patrick Falk has this report.
Well, China has issued evacuation advisories for its citizens in Iran and Israel as retaliatory strikes and instability have disrupted travel and prompted flight cancellations. Earlier today, the Foreign Ministry told citizens to strengthen personal precautions and to evacuate safely as soon as possible. Reports say more than 3,000 Chinese nationals have been evacuated so far from Iran. Beijing also confirmed that one of its citizens was killed as a result of the conflict. China has described the attacks as unacceptable, a violation of sovereignty and international law, and called on parties to respect the security interests of all Gulf states. While condemning the violence, China has stopped short of offering military support to Tehran, instead emphasizing the need for political solutions. Analysts say Beijing's response reflects its broader approach, maintaining strategic ties with Iran, protecting its energy and economic interests, and positioning itself as a broker of stability rather than escalation. That balancing act comes as the conflict is already affecting global markets and cross-border investment activity. Financial firms with Middle East operations, including some with Chinese interests, have postponed travel and deals amid security concerns, highlighting how the crisis is rippling into economic and commercial relationships. China's calibrated stance suggests it is wary of being drawn into the conflict, even as it presses for a ceasefire and greater diplomatic engagement to avoid further regional spillover.
Now, global oil prices have risen as Iran continues to launch strikes across the Middle East in response to ongoing attacks by the US and Israel. Brent crude has jumped by 10% to around $82 a barrel. That's after at least 3 ships were attacked near the Strait of Hormuz. Shares in airlines have also fallen after airspace was closed across the Middle East. Rawia, let's talk about oil prices, because markets responding and a spike in oil prices is probably the most predictable thing about this war, let's be honest. But what else can we say? Clearly inevitable.
It is very inevitable. It is very expected, of course, to happen, considering the nature of these strikes and the nature of this conflict. And of course, Iran is an oil country. But I mean, why was it inevitable specifically when it comes to Iran? Because of Strait of Hormuz. Let's not forget that 20% of the world's oil, of global oil shipments pass through the Strait of Hormuz, and it's about 15 million barrels per day. Now, when the strikes started, obviously the movement across the strait stopped to a near standstill, and then we had, of course, the targeting of the oil tankers, 2 on Sunday, a 3rd one in Oman today as well. So it is expected that this is going to affect the global markets, considering oil is a global commodity. So therefore, the surge was expected. Let's not forget also that the oil prices have been rising in the past few weeks because of the threats, the American threats to strike Iran. It has reached $73 to the barrel on Friday, just hours before the strikes began. And now it jumped a bit further, almost, as we said, about 10%. But consider 10% is not that high when you compare the oil price surges that happened in the past with far less serious conflicts.
And I was thinking about this, and there's lots of reasons for that. One, it was baked into the price because Donald Trump has been talking about attacking Iran for weeks now. Lots of ships came through the Strait of Hormuz. And also we saw that OPEC meeting where they agreed to lift the number of barrels of oil in supply. So there we are. There's 2 other reasons for that. But also that Today, Iran's Revolutionary Guard said that they had attacked an allegedly US-linked oil tanker in the Strait of Hormuz. And this is as part of a wave of strikes retaliating against a US-Israeli assault. And I find it really interesting because, as you said, Strait of Hormuz, a choke point when it comes to oil. But, Jono, we can't forget that it also is trade. You know, 30% of the world's fertilizer also goes through the Strait of Hormuz. So this has a knock-on effect on everything. And, of course, airlines.
Of course it does. We ship it in general, but we see this a lot. The Suez Canal, if there's even the most minor of a rattle there, that causes a global supply issue, and the Strait of Hormuz is the big one. But this is... the market price indicatively will have dropped straight away. Of course you'll see this. I mean, come on, is this really a news story telling you that oil prices are up because there's a war? Of course we hear this over and over again. 1%, that's what the FTSE fell by yesterday. And you might think that sounds quite dramatic, but if you look at the grand scheme of things, and like Rawia said as well, it's actually not been as bad as previous conflicts. The Western world is relying less on oil right now. If you look at something like 2020, even 2021, when we saw Afghanistan, we were looking at potentially 40 to 50% of global energy was met by oil in the entire global supply. Now we're down at somewhere around 30%, and that's largely due to renewable energy, which has been fueled key by the West. And you will see places like India, however, and China will require that oil as well. But guess what? Oil isn't going from the Strait of Hormuz to go to China or India, so therefore it shouldn't interrupt that supply too much. So there will be less of a knock-on effect than we've seen previously, partially due to the fact that we're using renewable energy. But the issue with flights, of course, is that, yes, we've seen a knock-on effect, and that's inevitable. Just look at the news. The airspace disruption was pretty immediate after impacts took place and after those missiles were deterred. So several Middle Eastern corridors have now been completely restricted or have been closed off partially in places, and we're seeing a gradual return. We're hearing that Etihad and Emirates in the UAE have had a gradual return to service this evening, which is very reassuring because you're not going to put commercial airliners in the sky if you believe there is an active threat. So that is a real reassuring news that's emerging this evening as well. Of course, the shares in airlines have dropped. That is inevitable. The schedules will resume. The shares will then resume afterwards. It will take some time. If you just look at COVID, it was a lot of a longer, protracted, drawn out, but then airline travel came back and then doubled, which was very impressive.
And prices doubled.
Prices doubled as well. But I do think we're in this...
with higher oil prices, we could be paying more for our flights.
We'll pay more.
Start again.
But look, it will stabilise. There will be a rebound. Carriers have been, correctly, they're operating cautiously at the moment. I, for one, certainly as a passenger, wouldn't love to be in an airline aircraft right now. So I can see the reasoning behind it. It will bounce back, but it was inevitable that this was going to happen.
What I find also really interesting is we're in Dubai right now, and Dubai International Airport is literally the busiest airport in the world. It's a hub where people connect to so many different places. So like you said, Jono, people are stuck because they can't get connecting flights. So that's a backlog we're seeing. We are hearing reports that the first flights have left Dubai this evening as they do start resuming these flights slowly. But another thing that we're experiencing is trade, Amazon deliveries. If you ordered anything here in the Middle East from Amazon, you know that that's going to be delayed. You know, other shipments, I know Jono said Temu.
Yeah, I'm concerned for a Temu shipment that's on the way.
He's concerned for his Temu shipping.
I mean,
But if that's the only cost that we have from this war,
I'm just about to say that.
I think we're okay. You know, if we can't go on our holidays,
No,
absolutely.
But I'm just saying, in the wider scope, it shows how important air travel is.
Of course, and for this region.
I mean, whether
for trade.
Not just air travel. I mean, even the sea routes are cut off. So it's air travel, sea routes, and we are a connected world. Globally, everything is connected to each other. So naturally, there's going to be a knock-on effect, whether it be in trade, oil prices, inflation, and if this stays on, and oil prices keep rising.
And that is a big concern, I think, because, you know, they've been talking so much about economic recovery because we've seen a sustained inflation well well above the Bank of England and the Fed's 2% that we're seeing in the US and the UK.
Yeah.
And with sustained oil prices being higher, that will affect people at the petrol pumps and affect people's prices of energy in homes. So, you know, it could see sustained higher prices.
It could be higher prices in the supermarket as well, because
of course.
we're talking about this
Exactly.
is
Supply lines,
supply lines,
chains.
logistics, everything.
But I know we laugh about Temu, but these companies need to make money, and they do a lot of it internationally. So Amazon and Temu,
They'll survive.
they'll survive. Yes, agreed.
survive.
Okay, now it's that time of the show where Jono and Rawia have chosen two of their quirkiest stories of the day. Jono, I kind of feel like yours ties into what we've just been talking about, but it's about Tampa Airport, which is in America, it's in Florida, and apparently it's banning pajamas.
Yeah, this was on the airport's official account on X the other day. They said they were going Crocs free, effective immediately, and they'd seen enough of pajamas, so they were also going to outlaw those from the airport. The post got 5.7 million views by mid-afternoon, so it had gone viral everywhere, and people had thought, oh, this is not a bad idea. And I, for one, had a little round of applause for Tampa, thinking how wonderful, only to find out afterwards that it was a little bit tongue-in-cheek and it had been cultivated a few days earlier on X, and the account said, look, this is actually just a bit of a joke. You can wear whatever you want to go into the airport. And I, for one, was disappointed because I feel that we are dressing like slobs far too often when we make a trip to the airport. And when we all are able to go back on our travels again in the next couple of days, I would like to think that pajamas and Crocs are not going to be the option that people are wearing.
Is leisure wear okay? Because I was just thinking about what I travel in.
We should be allowed to wear comfortable clothes, especially if the flight is very long.
Pajamas,
not
lounge wear, like
pajamas,
fancy lounge wear. Is that acceptable?
It doesn't. It depends.
Sweats. How about sweats?
I'm fine with sweats. Honestly, I don't personally, because I'm of the ilk that maybe I'm from a generation whereby I feel like you have to dress up to travel by air in case you get bumped at the.
It used to be, by the way, in the 90s.
Goes in the suit
in the
with the
90s
briefcase.
and 2000s, when you travel, people used to be sort of. They looked really smart. Some people traveled with suits. You know,
absolutely.
Ladies in high heels. None of this now.
Yeah, no. There's none of it. We are literally.
Imagine, actually, to be honest, the last time I got my last flight when I went on holiday, I did wear Crocs, but my cousin wore them with socks, so I thought I was winning because I didn't have the socks and Crocs, but I just had the Crocs, which I think, come on, you know.
But there's no reason for you. I wouldn't go to the mall in loungewear that I would wear in my house, and I know it's difficult to distinguish these days because a lot of pajamas are designer and they look like something you could wear out, but there's no excuse for you to dress in something you would wear in your house or sleep in to go out to the mall, to get on a flight, or to actually be seen in public. And I think it's becoming all too prevalent now. Don't even get me started on the school run in the mornings. Don't even get me started.
You shouldn't go to America. Then you should don't fly to America.
But I do think it's quite interesting because I was walking my dogs this morning and I saw a lady walking her dogs in her pajamas and a dressing gown.
Is you a reporter? Reporter. There's got to be somebody who listens. It should be.
Illegal?
It should be.
But I do agree. I think sometimes, you know, getting dressed up, putting a bit of makeup on, making an effort also gets your day started. And it's just...
It feels good for you. I mean, it's not about other people.
Dress nicely. My mum always said you never know when you're going to get hit by a bus. Very optimistic. But she always said wear clean underwear and nice clothes because you never know when you're going to have to go to the hospital in the clothes that you're in.
Oh, my God.
And I think I live by that rule.
Well done.
Jono's mum. I'm going to start living by that rule too.
She's going to be proud of you.
Yes, she's very proud of you. Anyway, Rawia.
Yes. Actually, my story is about a joke as well.
Clean underwear to E.T.
But it's not about clean underwear. It's about basically this family that had this private joke running for years. They're talking about an amusement park, the Universal Studios in California, and there's a specific ride. I haven't been on it, but apparently it's an E.T. ride, you know, the alien character E.T. from the movie. And apparently at the end of the ride, the E.T., I don't know whether we can hear it or not, E.T. usually thanks, you know, the people that were on the ride by name, which means that you need, before you start the ride, you need to give your name. So apparently this family, they were joking about, imagine if everybody on the carriage, because they're like in carriages, the passengers, they all have the same name, and then E.T. has to thank them, each one by name, and he would be repeating the same name, and that's exactly what they did. The entire family, basically the mom, the dad, the kids, everybody gave the name Chuck. So E.T. was going, thank you, Chuck, thank you, Chuck, thank you, Chuck. for like 6-7 people.
I mean, this family
Yes, they actually lived the joke that they were
I think
laughing
this family
about.
must be a bit bored if that's their
Quite
family
honestly,
joke.
yes, I found it bizarre. It's not that funny. It's a bizarre story.
It's bizarre.
But-
I would have given inappropriate names.
Yes.
And then got to give those on the way out the door. But I would have cried because a costume character, although this tough exterior, you might be surprised to find out costume characters do make me cry with joy.
What, E.T.?
Well, any of them. Bugs Bunny, E.T., Mickey Mouse. Yeah, Puss in Boots, any of those, I do.
Right.
Yeah, I get quite emotional. I enjoy meeting the
Do you
costume
not just know
characters.
that it's not real?
I don't care.
That's a child in him.
I know that's
Still
a
alive.
alive. Because if I see someone dressed up as Mickey Mouse or whatever, I just think, oh gosh, you're not real.
Yeah, my
Don't
internal
waste my
emotions, I
time.
can't
And I
comprehend.
think, how can you take the heat inside that suit?
Oh,
Apparently they've
That's
got
what I'd be
fans.
thinking
They've got
about.
fans
Oh,
in the
got
Port
fans.
LA season there, yeah.
Do you think E.T. phoned home after thanking Tuck?
I think he was laughing.
Yeah. But thank you so much to our guests today, broadcaster Jono Hayes and Al Arabiya English senior presenter Rawia Alami. And of course, that's all from us on W News Extra. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on X, GMT. That's coming up next. Goodbye and thank you.